And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Roberto to repose the question. What is it that you New Yorkers want to know about?
I want to know what is going on in Connecticut. And I know that there has been a tremendous velocity of people and an exodus from New York, which is slowing down. And I know that you guys don't have a lot of inventory. So that's driving a lot of your market. But without inventory, your deal volume has to slowly kind of shrink if you don't have anything to sell. And then with regards to pricing, you've had a price appreciation. How long, just like New York's market, New York is exploding right now. How long can this last? And are there markets that are more elastic than others? I'd like to know. I'd like a basic overview first, and then I'd like to know what the differences are between some of you.
Well, I just like to say, I mean, people have been asking that, like, you know, can it go on? You know, how long can it go on? Because it's just keeps the pitch of the buyer demand just keeps going up and the prices keep going up and inventory has been low for 8 months. I mean, we've had low inventory for a long time. So, but it just keeps going at this point. I mean, I don't see anything in the stats that says, okay, there it is. You know, we're starting to slow here. I mean, there's an occasional month where a town won't have record number of sales relative to what it's done in the past. But generally, you know, the demand is still super strong, and like the close to sale price or close to list price ratio, it just keeps going up. So now it's at 100%. Actually, in May, it's over 100%. So it's like 101%. The average that people are paying for a house is 101% of the ask price, the list price. So
have you noticed a difference in the demand from the beginning or the midst of the pandemic to now, in the sense of people were looking for primary residences and now you're seeing more secondary residences, or vice versa? Are you seeing a change in what the demand is?
I think we still see a ton of people looking for primary homes, at least in lower Fairfield County. I think once you get up and north, it's really second homes, right? Because the price point drops. And I think
it's less commutable, right? Less commutable.
You know, people are now starting to, you know, I drove into the city last week or 2 weeks ago. I was stuck in traffic. It's kind of back, right? Like, I feel like New York City is kind of back. Our buyers are still active. I think in the pandemic, it was definitely moving, right? You guys were stuck, not allowed to do anything. We were allowed to do real estate in the state of Connecticut, which kept us afloat. And it was really those people that had been sitting on the sidelines the year before that were really like, okay, now I'm ready. So now you've got people in this market who are just losing out, right? Like multiple bid situations on a lot of houses, and they're losing out. And thankfully, a lot of them are sticking with it and are just still moving on. But you have some that are like, you know what, I'm going to take a break until the fall. But I don't see anything changing for a year. In my opinion, that's just me in this town. And you look at it, it's not just here, right? You're looking at this across the US. California's experiencing the same thing. Florida's even worse than we are. So I think you have to look at it too, that it's not just the tri-state, right? It's everywhere that has the inventory shortage. Colorado, I mean, we've got friends looking there. It's like bidding more central. So that's always important to remember.
So we haven't seen a slowdown.
No.
You know, we haven't seen that effect of like low inventory having an effect.
Is most of the demand coming from New York?
I think
it's a mix. I really do. I think you've got some from New York, you got some relocating, you got some people that are selling and they're loving what they're selling at because they're selling, you know, higher than what usually they bought at, right? They're then buying high, but I think it's such a mix. You can't say that it's, you know, 60% New Yorkers. We do have a number of New Yorkers, but I don't think it's the brunt of it, right? The huge amount of it. But Brian,
yeah, I think a greater percentage of people from Connecticut are the buyers. It's much, there's a much greater percentage of people from New York than there were before. I mean, but still, in all, Connecticut is still the
place. You know, it's interesting because here we haven't seen foreign buyers are typically a big part of our marketplace in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And that's really dried up and still hasn't resuscitated itself quite yet. We're starting to see a couple people come in, and when travel opens, it'll definitely change. But everybody considers the foreign buyer right now the suburban buyer coming into New York.
I have a question for John Dicenzo. Recently, a Darien agent explained, I said, Amanda Spatola, I said, where are you getting your business? Where are you getting your buyers? And she said that the pattern is that New Yorkers have all heard of Greenwich, and they go to Greenwich and they find the most expensive prices in Fairfield County. It's the first stop on the train, Roberto. So if you're trying to orient yourself to Connecticut, you stop in Greenwich first, and therefore with low taxes, beaches, great schools, and the first stop on Metro North, you tend to start there. And she said, and when they find that they're priced out of the Greenwich market, then they come to Darien next. So my question is for John Dicenzo, who's way out there in Westport and Wilton, do they, when they say, I'm priced out of the Greenwich market, I think they also look at Westport. I think Westport also has an outsized reputation with New Yorkers, and I think they start in Greenwich and Westport. So I'm wondering, is that still the case? Is that true? And what does Westport feel that it's competing with for the New York attention?
I've always felt that Greenwich is a market unto itself, separate from all the other towns. And every town has its virtues. But if you look at the year-end numbers from 2020, Westport probably was the top performing town in the county. And I think part of that, when you remove commuting, which definitely hurt us over the last few years, the remote working scenario has really blunted the impact of commuting, which has also, I think, benefited places to the north and east like Reading and Easton and places like that that are much more attractive now to buyers. Robyn mentioned the lower price points. You remove daily commuting from the equation, and people see some different options that are available. But Westport has a pedigree and a history, especially on a per capita basis, that's unique in Fairfield County. No other community with 25,000 people has the theatrical history, the history with artists, more restaurants per capita probably than any town in the area. I mean, we compete with Greenwich, even though Greenwich is much larger and has a more robust restaurant scene. But on a per head basis, we compete with a town much larger than ourselves. So I think that causes, and there's a history of openness with Westport. Traditionally, public country club, Longshore is well known as a public, for $100 a year, you get golf and sailing and tennis and, great restaurant. I think there's a natural connection with New Yorkers, given the diverse nature of Westport as a community.
So traveling, you have Greenwich. See, I always hear about Greenwich, New Canaan, Darien. I don't hear about Stamford. Do you have to, it's Greenwich and then there's this big void and then you've got to get to Darien and New Canaan before you kind of get back to Connecticut? What's Stamford?
Stamford is the biggest city it's really the most dynamic city in my opinion, in Connecticut. It's the third largest city. It's got just more of the typical Connecticut picture, maybe if you're not familiar with it, is you might think of like a town like Greenwich or Darien or New Canaan. But Stamford is a city. It's got some of those elements, but it's also got, a large downtown, a big corporate. There's a lot of businesses, corporate scene. So I don't know. It's diverse.
But it's the oddball. It's the oddball in this group.
I guess.
I think it's just I think it's so vast, right? You're looking at Darien has a population of like 21,000. Stamford has 130,000. So you've got a lot of little communities within Stamford, and it's kind of these little hidden gems that you just need to get in there and use one of our agents, take a town tour. I mean, my brother lives in Stamford near the Cove and loves it. That's kind of his jam. He can walk down to the water. There's this huge park. He can walk to the ice rink, play hockey. So it depends on what you want, right? My kids also went to school in North Stamford, this beautiful hidden oasis that looks very similar to New Canaan. So it's just kind of, you stumble upon it. I mean, I grew up in Darien, right? I'm on roads in Darien that I've never been on ever growing up here. You go to Stamford and you find all these little hidden gems, just like the same in New Canaan and Westport. You're always kind of finding these cool little places. So I don't know. I think Stamford's kind of cool, and they have great restaurants.
You rarely hear Stamford. When you hear Connecticut, you hear really those three names: Greenwich, New Canaan, Darien. Sometimes you hear Wilton. Huh?
Well, then the separate part is Norwalk, right? So you go to Darien and the next town over is Norwalk, which is comparable, Norwalk and Stamford. Brian, again, correct me if I'm wrong. Norwalk's a big, huge city. But then you have this teeny tiny, cute little town called Rowayton, which is where we live. Very small. But again, it's a lot of my friends who bought from the city, they started in Westchester, then they went over the border because of the taxes, the high taxes in Westchester. They went to Greenwich, they couldn't find what they wanted. They worked their way up the line, and then they drove into Rowayton. They're like, we're done. This is perfect. But I think it's what the buyer wants, right? And what their price point is and what their wants and their needs are. I think each town can offer a buyer a multitude of things.
Are there tax differences between all of these places?
Yeah.
Big tax differences, yeah.
But then again, that's offset somewhat by the home values, Roberta. So, you lower tax rates in the smaller suburbs, but the prices tend to be much higher. So there's a balancing effect there. I think Fairfield County, I've always felt Fairfield County, if you take lower Fairfield County with the 12 towns from Fairfield to Greenwich, north to Ridgefield, do that triangle, they're so different in their personalities and what they offer. It really does come down to what Robyn was saying about what you want as a buyer. And we had a gentleman I knew at the gym who had bought in Westport, and I was going on about how great Westport is, and he said, I hated it. I came out from the city and I wanted to get away from the noise because Westport bustles, And so he sold his house and he moved to Weston, and he's out in the woods and he's happy because he had to learn about what the variety that is available in our little corner of the world. And he just went where his friends told him to go. But once he got educated, he found there was something that really meshed with what he coveted. And I think that's one of the strengths of the area, is that there's such diversity, and each town has a distinct personality with virtues, based on what flavor you're looking for.
If I'm a buyer and I'm curious about schools, like who generally has the best schools?
We do.
Yeah, we all do. We all do.
I mean, all the schools were great. Look, anytime that I'm with a buyer, I tell them it depends on the kid and it depends on the parent, right? My kids go to Norwalk public schools and they're happy as clams, and I'm happy. Some people put up their nose to Norwalk. It's an amazing parent-run organization. So again, I think that you got to look. Everyone can be graded. Everyone can win a blue, certain awards. But I think you got to go to the school. Go to the school, take a tour, get an idea, talk to other parents. I think that's the best way to do it, in my opinion.
I laugh about it. I mean, I raised my hand, but if you were out here, you would know that every year, a couple magazines, Niche Magazine, US News and World Report, they put out their rankings. And every year they take all these towns in Fairfield County and they mix them up, right? So one year Darien has the best schools in the nation. And then the next year they're in fourth place and New Canaan does. And then they're in fourth place and Greenwich is suddenly, or Ridgefield or Wilton. I'm going to tell you that any one of say 6 towns are all competing to be in first or second place on any given year. So it's a little bit, comical because I think they just do it to sell more magazines. Because if Darien is winning, their realtors are leading with best schools in the country. And be careful what you wish for, because once all the New Yorkers discover that all the best schools are in Darien, then they go there. The prices go up. And then they're like, oh, I can get just as good an education in Wilton for less, and then they move, and then everybody moves over to, checks out Wilton because that's the value proposition. So they move around according to the rankings on a year-to-year basis.
Well, plus they're also quite often tenths of a percentage between the different ratings. And so if you're number 1 and number 5, it could be a fraction, which
Right.
really makes it kind of silly.
Robyn, you wanted to say something?
Well, I want to say something, and then I think Skylar has a question. There's also a huge amount of private schools too. My nieces and nephew went to private school. They had a great experience. And I think it boils down to the kid.
Sure.
But Skylar Minkler, not Skylar Morris, had a question. Oh, but she needs to unmute.
I was just curious. So is this more panel or Q&A? Like the format that you guys are using?
Oh yeah, you could dive right in. We're very informal here.
Okay, I just wasn't sure. I'm like, everyone else is silent. I'm like, I'm so used to people jumping in. But one of the huge things too is a lot of people go to private schools. And that's, I think, where Stamford comes, there's certain towns. I remember that was the big thing when I was growing up. Everyone was private schools. And so what's the nearest private school? Which one are you going to? And that's a huge draw in our area for all the towns. I mean, I think every town has a competing private school that's top notch for whatever they want.
So from a standpoint of these commutable towns, obviously Greenwich, and as you go up, is Darien more commutable than New Canaan?
Yes. And so I can quantify that by saying that pre-pandemic, before they changed the Metro North train schedules around, there were 14 direct trains passing through Darien every morning, and 9 would make a left turn and make their way to New Canaan. So Darien could say, we've got basically service every half hour during the commute, morning commute, and in the evening. So you can always get to the Darien station, and there's ample parking. There's something like 800 parking spaces at the Darien park station. New Canaan has about 400 parkings and only 9 trains. And probably 12 more minutes of commute because it's a spur line. So instead of a 56-minute commute, it might be an hour 12. So that was a major difference pre-pandemic between the two towns, is your accessibility on Metro North. Now, both those parking lots are mostly empty, and because people are de-emphasizing, as John Dicenzo said, de-emphasizing the commute, so that difference between the two towns has just become a lot less.
But don't you feel that commute is going to come back into some substantial importance? And like Robyn, you said you ran into a ton of traffic because that's people aren't taking the train.
Well, I thought I was being so smart driving in and I'd beat all the traffic, and no, there was tons of traffic. Do not drive in for a 10 o'clock meeting. Take the train. But I will also say some people take, like my brother-in-law lives in New Canaan, and he would drive down to the Rowayton train station every morning and hook it from Rowayton into the city. So it's just a matter of, but he also wanted this huge amount of land, and that's what he found in New Canaan. So his personal needs were met in New Canaan, but his commuting needs were met in Rowayton. So I definitely think the commuting is going to come back. It's just in what capacity, right? Like there are tons of people driving right now. That's what they want to do.
What about a place like Danbury? Is that Fairfield County?
Yes.
I think it is, yes.
Does anybody, that's pretty far, right? Does anybody commute from Danbury?
They actually do.
But it's a different train line.
Correct.
So it's a different, I mean, you don't pass through any of these towns on your way to Danbury. You take a different train and
So
you don't come in contact.
But has Danbury thrived throughout this also?
Yeah, we've had some listings up there out of my offices, and we've actually had some multiple bid action. So I don't tend to look at the numbers as closely in that market, but I think from work on the smart MLS, my understanding is that the whole state has been pretty robust, even once you get outside of the New York influence.
So my general, Greenwich is the most expensive, correct? It's the closest, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
Is Darien more expensive than, on a total general level? Like, is the Upper West Side more expensive than Tribeca? You know, is New Canaan or Darien more expensive?
Darien slightly, depends.
This month, all of Greenwich has an average closing price of, Greenwich is at 3 million. New Canaan is at 2.2 million and Darien is 1.9. But that could change tomorrow.
And what sort of volume of transactions does it say? In those
45
markets?
sales in New Canaan, 42 in Darien. Remember, they're both have 4,200 kids in their school system. They're both 20 square miles. They both have nearly identical taxes, nearly identical schools. Darien has great beaches because they're on the coast. But as a result of being on the coast, a little bit more dense, a little bit less land for your average home. You've got neighborhoods like Tokenique down on the water, which bring their average price way up. And then you have what I would say traditionally blue collar neighborhoods. They're no longer very blue collar, but they have smaller homes like Rowayton Heights. Am I allowed to say all this? Rowayton Heights, which has turned over, but you have a lot of quarter-acre lots in Rowayton Heights. So if I look at those two neighborhoods between waterfront balanced with quarter-acre lots at the Rowayton Heights train station, you know, versus say a lot of 4-acre lots in New Canaan, you know, you have a great range of housing stock across the two towns. So as much as I could talk about them being homogeneous, there's great big differences between neighborhood to neighborhood in each.
So are there people like Upper West versus Upper East? Are there people that are like, there's no way I'm living on the Upper West Side? Or there's no way I'm living on the Upper East Side? Someone not living in Darien or not living in New Canaan?
Yes.
Like there's no way.
Huge. I mean,
really?
Again, I grew up in Darien. Like New Canaan was like taboo. Like you did not communicate with those people. The schools are like,
Wow.
But again, it depends on what someone wants, right? Like,
sure.
I've got family that lives in New Canaan. They love it. They think it's amazing. I think everyone's very proud of their own town in one way or another. That's why they choose to live there. You know, we chose Rowayton for various reasons. We love Rowayton.
Can we talk about that? I've been looking at the map as we're talking, and in Norwalk, Rowayton is this little spot in all of that. Is that like this little special enclave of all of Norwalk?
Well, okay, so Norwalk has a couple little special enclaves. They've got Rowayton, they've got Wilson Point, they've got Harbor Shores. There are these little, again, these cute little neighborhoods that are on the water. Again, New Canaan doesn't have that kind of water, just saying, John. But we loved it, right? We're water people, we can walk everywhere. It's a very small, cute little community where you could have a gajillion dollars or you could have not so much dollars and still, you know, exist. But it's literally maybe one stoplight. It's a couple of restaurants I can count on my hand. It's got a post office, a dry cleaner, and a market. And it's just this, again, it's a sweet little area. And we have great maps at Brown Harris that show you all these little walking paths and things like that, that again, use the agents for this type of information that can help, you know, show you what the towns have to offer.
A lot of quarter-acre lots. So if you want to be able to
2.5, and it's great, low maintenance. It's great for someone coming out from the city.
So let's just do this. John and I have this. We have this word association, and I just want to hear one word out of John, and Robyn when I bring up these towns. I just want to hear one word.
I'm not good at this game.
Stamford. Robyn.
Big.
John. Dicenzo.
Urban.
John.
Great range, great diversity.
Old Greenwich.
Folksy.
Folksy.
Waterfront.
Love Biddy Park.
Waterfront.
New Haven, which I know is
Yale.
That's
Yale.
Yeah, I was gonna say Artie. Yeah.
Wilton.
I live there, so that's unbiased.
Oh, go ahead.
But what would
have
you
to start
say?
with-
What would you
Wilton, to me, even before I moved there, Wilton was always an extremely friendly town among the enclave of these cluster of towns. A little softer touch in Wilton.
Where did you live prior?
Norwalk.
I say forests, and I should know better, but when I think of Wilton, I think of trees. The trees are touching over your head as you drive down the roads of Wilton. You are covered with trees everywhere. So I think of it as a very treed town.
Did you clear the decks in New Canaan there, John?
Litchfield.
Where? What?
Litchfield, like Litchfield County. Like
A
what?
lot of second homes. If y'all haven't gone to Arethusa Farms, go to Arethusa Farms. That's all I can say.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second. Litchfield County, there's a lot of people who have second homes there, but people in Fairfield County, where do they have second homes?
Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, Cape Cod.
The
Cape
Jersey
Cod.
Shore, Kiowa. I mean, it
Right
completely ranges.
Okay, let's keep going. The Hamptons.
Too crowded.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Far
Would you say,
away.
John?
Traffic.
You know, one important difference.
said-
Roberto, I have a question. When you talk about the water in Connecticut, you're talking about on the Sound, correct?
right.
Yes. Does the Hamptons have open water?
Not in the ocean, not the ocean, correct?
This-
Long Island Sound.
Just because you said Hamptons, Roberto, that was just because you said Hamptons.
No, I know.
Plus
It's your island.
Wait. I want to make a point about the Hamptons versus Connecticut. And tell me if I'm wrong, because I know Michael and Roberto go to the Hamptons. I think of it as a seasonal market. And until the pandemic, none of the towns you just talked about had a significant seasonal market, summer rental market like the Hamptons. And that seems to be changing in my perception. Greenwich had a bit and Westport had a bit because they have waterfront. They had some seasonal market, but it wasn't a dominant part of the culture, not a dominant part of the economy. And that seems to be changing a little bit in Connecticut. So when I think of the Hamptons, I think of a town of like 10,000 that becomes 100,000 in the summer. And we don't have anything like that in Connecticut.
Roberto, correct me or add. It depends on which of the Hamptons you're referring to. Back in it was either the late 90s or the early 2000s, Bridgehampton won the state basketball championship.
No
Okay.
way.
And they won it like 3 out of like 5 years. Hampton does have a year-round community. Southampton has a year-round community. East Hampton has a little bit less of a year-round community, or had, pre-pandemic, although it was starting to develop a year-round. So I think that your memory is of a little bit behind of what has occurred, but absolutely. Yes, but Southampton is a big year-round community. Roberto, I mean, you're there. Am I?
Yeah, no, the high school's booming. I was there the other day. I mean, it's just like, it's a bustling place. It really is.
But is it more bustling now than like 3 years ago?
Perhaps more on a yearly basis, just because there's still hybrid working.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
Okay. One question, it's not a word association, but if money was no object, where do you live?
Rowayton, sorry.
Manhattan, that's the answer. I'm busting, John.
Sorry.
Would any of you live in Manhattan? Out of
Yes,
choice?
No.
I would. Already did it.
I'd have a weekend home there. I would do that. Pied à terre,
Okay,
but
Fair
no
enough.
dogs.
fair enough. Which is the most emerging town?
What does emerging mean?
Yeah. Define that one.
Where, for example, you talk about the Hamptons not really having it's really growing. There's a community that's building. There's lots of new neighborhoods coming. There are people populating it and actually creating business there.
Now, Roberta, we don't have the room. These are all mature towns. We don't have room for significant developments. You'd have to look into northern Fairfield County where there's open space.
So
And
like
if-
Ridgefield, you mean?
You know, beyond Ridgefield even, you're back into Danbury, New Milford, Brookfield, places like that where there is open space. Should people choose to live and work from there, you could put up a 200 house subdivision. I'm not sure that between New Canaan, Darien, and Westport, you could squeeze a plot of land where you could do that.
No, but you do see the local towns, right? They're changing, right? Darien's got big developments on the table. New Canaan's doing a great development by Carp. So those are changes that we haven't seen in a while that are going to completely change the downtown areas. But it's on existing.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking, for example, like Manhattan is it's a finite place, right? But there have been emerging neighborhoods, and which has diluted demand in some of the neighborhoods. Like, for example, even Brooklyn has had such an emergence where it's taken a lot of the intense demand from Manhattan and taken it there. Not that there's not still substantial demand, but that's what I'm wondering, like in New Canaan, are there certain pockets where there are new neighborhoods that are literally coming and it's emerging?
I would throw Shelton in there.
Yeah,
Where's that?
fair.
That's Eastern Fairfield County.
Yeah.
Far East.
A lot of new developments going in there. A lot of new companies are moving in, and there's a lot of influx of new restaurants. I would say it's a pretty emerging area.
So are those places you're taking buyers at all?
It's not really an area I cover very often, but I have sold one property there.
John, you?
What the View is serving, which is in New Canaan, is an underserved portion of the market. And that might be an opportunity for new housing stock because all of our towns underserve the empty nester or very young population. So you get a condominium development, low maintenance housing with 1 or 2 bedrooms. There's a real need for empty nesters who want to sell their big house, and there aren't a lot of places for them to go to. And so we're watching that project. It's very, very well done. It's beautifully done, and it's an interesting product because again, I think for the people that don't want to go down south, we're not always giving them a lot of options to stay here.
What about rental property? Is there enough?
Never.
In my opinion, no. There needs to be more.
And it's gotten a lot worse in the last year.
How's your housing stock in New York? In Manhattan, 70% of the housing stock in Manhattan is rental property. What is it? Do you know any of those numbers?
Yeah, it's like 18. I put it in the email I sent out promoting this show, and it shows many of the towns have 8%, maybe 10% is rental.
That's
and it's definitely single digit. And in some of the cities, it's as high as 20-30%, but it's not like Manhattan.
Oh my gosh, that's so different.
But they are looking to improve that, right? Like Darien is looking to get more rental stock, improve that. Stamford did a great job down in Harbor Point. That's a beautiful area that was emerging. Did not look like it did 15 years ago. Now it's full of, tons of high-rise apartment buildings that are rentals, completely ranging the gamut with restaurants and things like that. So I do think that towns are addressing it, like New Canaan. There wasn't really a place for the downsizers to go to. So again, the View really helped offer that as rentals because, they sell their big houses and they don't necessarily want to buy another house. They want to have that ease of use, right? Where they can call the landlord. But I do think
maybe I'm just skewed because I'm in Manhattan. I mean, that's probably very typical of most of the country, I would think, right?
I would think so.
God, it seems so low.
It's a recent.
Remember, Stamford's a city, but everything it's suburbs, and just like Nassau County, just like Suffolk County. If you looked at the percentage of rental to ownership, I mean, it's going to be skewed very much towards ownership.
Yeah.
New York was built as multiple unit structures. Okay. I mean, you didn't know how to own that.
Yeah.
The first co-op, I think, in New York was built in the early 1900s. Well, there are a lot of buildings prior to the 1900s that were built, So, so it's just you moved out of the city to go buy a home. If you look at all in Connecticut, in Westchester, they all were in the 5 boroughs. They all moved out. So I think that's where, if they wanted to rent, they would have stayed in the city.
And Michael, another factor is that outside of Stamford and Norwalk, we have a collection of small towns. And so it's hard for the smaller towns to support the rental market. It's $20,000 a kid, in terms of the hit on the town to educate a child in the public school system. And so the towns of 18, 19,000 people can only absorb so many units when these folks are living and not paying their fair share of taxes as tenants, because they're not property owners. So it's a challenge even for I think New Canaan, Darien, and Wilton as examples, Weston, even Ridgefield. I mean, you can absorb, you can have some, and you want to have the housing stock, but you have to balance it with the revenue that you can generate without savaging your tax base.
Pre-pandemic, my rule of thumb in New Canaan was if I had a client with $1 million worth of house, and they said, how much could I rent it for? It was sort of a $5,000 proposition to rent, an $800,000 or $1 million worth of house. And you couldn't make money as a landlord. So from a landlord's standpoint, once you paid your taxes and once you paid your cost of carry, nobody was really making money as a landlord. So number one, you didn't have the demand. People don't move out here, to Michael's point. People don't move out here to rent. And number two, the landlords didn't make them available because you couldn't make a lot of money. That's beginning to change. We've begun to see in places like New Canaan, developers and smart investors are buying up all the low end of the market, the condominiums at Heritage Hill for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, and they're making them available as rentals. And now you've seen in the post-pandemic world, those $5,000 rental houses are now $8,000 and $10,000. So the rental market has been set on its ear in the last 12 months. While you've seen price appreciation of maybe 10 and 20% on the purchase of that $1 million house, you're starting to see price appreciation on the rental of that $1 million house in Fairfield County has doubled. I have a client right now who's got $1 million house, $50 for the last 5 years. And now he's put it out there at $8,500, and he'll probably get it because there's only 5 houses for rent between, say, $8,000 and $20,000 in a town like New Canaan. There's only 5 available.
John, I have my own idea as to why, but tell me why that happened, why that $5,000 rental is now $8,000.
I think that you have such an increase of demand. And why do you have an increase in demand? Well, number one, you have people who have decided to, who are thinking about moving out from the city one day, have accelerated that for a number of reasons and have come out, sooner, either as so you have a crush of more demand from second house buyers and primary house buyers. And you have too little inventory because a lot of these people are saying, where would I go? So too little inventory combined with rising prices, anxiety causes them to say, well, if I sell my house, where will I go? And if I rent this house, there are no rentals. So there's all us realtors are having a tough time pricing rentals and houses right now.
So let me tell you my pro New York story. In 2 years, those people who were renting it for $8,500 are going to be renting them for $5,500 again, because everybody who moved out of New York for the pandemic and rented and didn't buy because they had no intention of ever staying out in the boonies, okay, are going to go back to New York.
I think you're
That's
wrong.
my pro New York, but you
I-
know me, I'm the pro New Yorker.
I think that there's 80 million millennials following 50 million of me, the Gen Xers, following 80 million baby boomers. So I think you've got 80 million millennials moving into the market. And so I don't think it's a New York versus Connecticut phenomenon. I think it's a demographic phenomenon. You have more millennials than houses in Connecticut and New York and Austin, Texas. And so therefore, I think that the demand is a long-term problem.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
imbalance in the market is a long-term problem. We're not built. We in Connecticut, let me tell you, Roberto, you know what our motto is here? The land of steady habits. We don't make many changes in Connecticut and in Fairfield County in particular. We like to keep our zoning just the way it was. We like to keep, there's not a lot of progressive thinking in Fairfield County when it comes to real estate. We're not building housing stock to meet the new demand. This is the land of steady habits. And so I don't see us responding to this newfound demand of these millennials coming out here. I see the prices continuing to rise.
Is that who you're finding, John? Are you finding a lot of the millennials who are coming out and renting, or you're finding younger families?
I'm finding both. If you can't buy for whatever reason, your job, your current income, or you haven't been in your job long enough, or 1,000 reasons, or the house doesn't, then you look to rent, and there's so little rental that prices go up.
But you're finding younger people, the millennials who want the suburban style?
All right, well, I'm going to turn to my co-panelist, but my theory was 50% of the New Canaan trades were crosstown moves. We had 1/4 out of New York and 1/4 out of other, and that has changed. And I believe that 50% crosstown moves is now 1/4 crosstown moves. I think 50% of our market are coming out of New York and Brooklyn, and 25% still comes from out of area, transfers from London, California, Texas, whatever. Is that true, John Dicenzo in Westport? Is it 50% coming out of New York?
We certainly, you can tell from the license plates on the cars around town. But I've never felt that the New Yorkers were really fleeing New York. We've had so many clients who bought in our market who retained their New York residence. And I think with the hybrid commuting working situation, I think people are just going to live differently. And so, and I did have some conversations with our colleague Richard Ferrari about this, and he brings that Park Avenue perspective, and we were in agreement. I thought people were just looking for another option, whether it's the Hamptons or New Jersey or Connecticut, not abandoning the city. They just were going to live differently. And I think technology allows it. Certainly, I've seen it anecdotally with young people that I know under a certain age. They just won't ride the trains 5 days a week anymore. I think the train stations will go back to 75 or 80% capacity. Westport was always at 120% capacity. I think that's done. But it doesn't mean that those folks aren't going to go in the city. It doesn't mean they're not going to keep their apartment and live there part of the time and live here part of the time. The other point that John Engel mentioned that has been something I've been focusing on is that the national trades, there's been a lot of analysis that after 10 years of waiting, that the millennials are out in earnest. And that is a giant population swell. And if that's true, that's very interesting in terms of the long-term ramifications on the market, especially given the national inventory problem. And in fact, Inman had an article just about 10 days ago about the impending national housing crisis. With the combination of increased construction costs balanced by this population swell of consumers entering the housing market. So we'll have to see if it plays out, but it's a very interesting scenario.
Which could be positive for all markets.
Right.
But Michael, to your point, you're saying you think people that moved out here and rented are going to move back into the city. I think there's one thinking that goes that, like, when people with kids, at least, moved out from New York, maybe they were in New York thinking, I'm going to find my kid a school in the city and whatever, and they moved out to the suburbs, to Fairfield County. I think that they're going to realize just how much easier it is out here, maybe. As far as schools go, you don't have to, the competitiveness to get into schools in the city is just doesn't exist out here in that way. So that's one population that I don't think is going to as easily turn around and go, okay, we tried it out here and now we're going to go back in the city and pay for private schools for 3 kids or that type of thing.
Brian, I don't disagree with you, but that population was going to move out of New York anyway.
I don't know. I mean, I think the pandemic pushed
Moving
a
out,
lot
if
of
they
people.
didn't want the competitiveness, if they were moving out because of the expense, they were going to move out.
Michael, I have 2 clients who are millennials and they have no children. One couple is unmarried and the other is about to get married and they're looking to buy a house in Connecticut. So I thought they were unusual clients for me because most of them are married and have children. But I've seen personally in the past 3 months, people saying, well, our friends have moved out here. We want to make the shift as well.
Serena, did they have a tie locally that made them come here? Or was it just unprompted? They just wanted to go?
Interestingly, no, they have both have ties to New Jersey, but all of their friends moved to Connecticut.
Interesting.
Did they start in Greenwich and then choose Darien?
Not at all. Didn't even look in Greenwich, actually. They didn't want the big city. They didn't want the large kind of snobbiness, as they put it. They moved directly to Darien.
They blew right past Stamford, you see?
They did. They wanted a small town.
See?
They wanted a small town, but they did not want old Greenwich. And that's usually what I found last year and the year before, actually before the pandemic. If you look at the charts, old Greenwich and Darien did extraordinarily well compared to the other towns in Lower Fairfield County. And I was always hearing that it's because they were seeking that small town atmosphere.
Serena, about how old were they?
Oh gosh, one graduated Penn 7 years ago.
So 30.
And do you have any idea where they grew up? Do you have any idea where they grew up?
He grew up in Philly. His wife or his fiance grew up in the Midwest. And then the other clients I have, they actually grew up in Boston. So Connecticut was more logical than say Long Island or Jersey.
The reason I asked the question was the small town versus city living, and I wanted to see whether there was any connection as to where, you know, what their history was. So I did that, but it's interesting. 3 out of the 4 grew up in cities, in Philly or in Boston. Only one was in the Midwest. So there was no, you know, there was no yearning for the, you know, for the small town. It was just that they wanted it now. That's why I asked that question.
I had an unmarried couple also that I sold a house to in Darien with no kids recently, and very similar to what you were saying. I showed them Buchanan and Darien because they had friends in both, and they ended up choosing Darien because the house that they liked, it was actually Nancy Dock's beautiful listing. But they both grew up in Long Island in you know, like near Roslyn, that area. And the reason they didn't want to go back there was because the taxes were too high.
That's the other
So I have an
demographic I'm
interesting-
seeing.
I just wanted
I
to.
have 2 clients. Oh, sorry. I have 2 clients from Westchester and one from Long Island who want to leave because of the taxes.
Oh yeah, me too. I just actually sold one from Scarsdale. Same thing, the taxes.
So I have an interesting question to pose all of you. If you were a millennial coming out of
I
New
give
York
up.
City and all you had was $1 million, I can't believe I'm saying that, but all you had was $1 million, where would you start to look, right? For your first home, you have $1 million budget. You're priced out of, according to the Greenwich market, is averaged at 3 million. Darien and New Canaan are too expensive. Looks like Rowayton's too expensive. Westport's too expensive. Wilton is an average price of $951. Norwalk, $735. Stamford, $704. Ridgefield. Now, to answer Roberto's, Ridgefield is a beautiful town, but it's 12 miles north of New Canaan. So it's another 20-minute drive. It becomes a little less commutable, but great schools, you know, beautiful town. So where do you go with your hard-earned $1 million when you begin your process, realtors? Do you go to, and you're deciding you want to buy your first home and you want to buy it for 20 years and raise a family? Where do you go? I mean, I think that these towns that I'm naming are going to be the winners because of the pandemic, because the commute is less important. And therefore, I can now afford to live and maybe work out of a town as far off of the coast as Ridgefield or Wilton or Weston or Easton or Reading.
Weston? What? Wait a sec. Weston's out of.
Actually, you're right. Weston is over $1 million.
Weston, I live in Weston, and believe me, I'm closer than most people to the train station. So Weston is, that's completely incorrect statement. Sorry. And as far as
you're absolutely right. Weston,
and as far as Ridgefield is concerned, Ridgefield, I've sold in Ridgefield because I sell all over. And if you're selling in Ridgefield, you're commuting from Wilton. So that is not a big deal, actually.
The average price in Weston is $1.2 million. So you're right. You're priced out of the market with New Canaan.
But again, John, I think it boils down to like what are their wants and needs, right? Like, I think you can find houses that are priced at $1 million or under. They're going to be far and few between in some towns, but they're there. You just have to have patience, and you have to know, I think, what town. Like, I would go and do a town tour and go check out like what town means the most and what's the inventory stock below $1 million, right? Like,
how much inventory is below $1 million in Darien now, do you think?
Not a lot.
Not much. Maybe one or two houses.
But my point is that there is some, right? Just like in New Canaan, there is some below $1 million.
If I get to 1.5, does it blow open the doors and have so much more, or is it just like maybe a couple?
You get a garage.
You get a garage.
Good point.
That's,
or you get an extra bedroom.
That's the bedrooms, Roberto. That's what that's called in New York. That's 2 extra bedrooms and a bath.
I think Fairfield brings a lot of opportunity for families at the $1 million and under range.
Yep. Average price $953. Fairfield is it's on the main line, so it's got a train station. You can get a lot of house for your money. $953,000 if you're willing to go an hour and 15 on the train.
And higher taxes though.
Hour and 15.
The
When you
taxes
said
are
New
lower
Canaan was
than
an
a
hour 12, what'd you say? An hour 5?
Well, because New Canaan's not a direct. Fairfield's going to be direct, so it's going to be 2 different ways, right?
And I think if you were to compare the mill rates, I think like a Weston and a Ridgefield are going to be, and even a Wilton are going to be much higher than Fairfield.
You also have to consider, because of the size of the town, first of all, beautiful, amazing amenities. And for a long time before the pandemic, Fairfield Center, which we do serve, was one of the hot spots in the whole county. Beautiful beaches and a restaurant scene that's one of the best in the county, very attractive to younger people. Very beautiful post road area. Other towns have beautiful, little commercial districts, but not at the same price, not at the same value proposition that Fairfield offers.
I agree with you. I think Fairfield, I've worked in Fairfield for years as one of the towns, because I've always been a multi-town broker. Fairfield is a unique town, actually, and it's comprised, like Norwalk, of like 6 different areas. So you have to understand the entire area. We're talking about Northern Fairfield. We're talking about, a whole different commuting idea off Black Rock, et cetera, as opposed to all of the areas that are down below. It's a unique town. And it has unique housing and such a spread of housing, as does Norwalk. So
I want to ask a question about Greenwich of my 2 stats guys, John Dicenzo and Brian Clary, because Brian lives in Greenwich. Westport was clearly the winner last year. Greatest change in price, greatest change in demand. But this year, Greenwich is in both categories far and away the largest, with 85 sales versus 34, 150% change in the number of sales in Greenwich and a 67% increase in the average closing price year over year. Greenwich is having a phenomenal 2021. Why? Why, Brian? Why, John? Why is Greenwich suddenly hot? The most hot.
I don't know that it wasn't. I mean, Greenwich is more difficult for some people because it's our most expensive town. So that's going to push some people, it's going to push Roberto up the line past Stamford, as he said a few times. But then again, that's why some folks gravitate to Stamford and Norwalk, because again, the value offered in exchange. So it depends on what the consumer can do. I think that it's early in the year, it's hard to say, but I never felt that Greenwich suffered or lagged last year. And these numbers that we're talking about, most of these towns are not large numbers, so they could swing easily. And I don't know, I look at the pipeline of both transactions. In our newsletters, we look at contracts. So I look at binders and contracts. A lot of the towns are really strong. So you
don't see Greenwich as being particularly a winner. They're all winning, and they're just having a good couple of months.
I think Westport did the same thing last year. I think Westport wasn't the winner. I think Westport just did a little bit better in a rising tide. And but Greenwich does have the benefit of being the first stop on the line, and most New Yorkers associate with Greenwich first for understandable reasons.
I think what might have happened, I had a client who moved to Greenwich, and he had told me he had been looking for several years, and he said and a couple of years ago, he said there's so many houses up there that are just sitting there. They're just sitting there. People have made these huge houses and they left, and no one wants to live there. And because of the pandemic, the demand actually absorbed all those. So all that inventory made for big numbers of transactions. I think that's what is skewing that a little bit, is that the inventory was actually there.
Yeah, completely agree with that.
I think you also have to look at the economics. People have and are willing to spend more money these days. So therefore, they're going to buy more expensive homes, and therefore that's going to drive purchases up in Greenwich.
Greenwich has kind of always been the town that, like, in terms of like recessions and things like that, it felt it the last and then came back the first. I don't know what it is. Maybe because it's closest to New York. The taxes are the lowest there. There's this very big incentive if you don't want to move too far outside of New York. So you're gonna go to Connecticut for the better taxes, but you want to stay as close to New York as possible. That it has that advantage. It has a lot of other things too. I mean, a lot of amenities. It's on the water, so that helps.
Brian, it's also significantly wealthier than the other wealthy towns.
Correct.
So that ties into your last in and first out.
That's
dynamic.
I have a question about that. In some ways, there's a perception Greenwich is just a bunch of rich people. Can you buy a decent? Can you find, like Robyn? Can you find with patience? Find like a decent house and in Greenwich and not have $1 bazillion. Like here, I'm living a 2-minute walk from Bono and these people. There, can you commingle in neighborhoods, or is it just all rich people?
So, I mean, Darien and New Canaan,
this is all perception. I'm just saying,
The Darien and New Canaan would be more that, like very little economic diversity. I mean, it's pretty much all, expensive and whatever. Greenwich, surprisingly, has a pretty big diversity. I mean, it's got a lot of different price points and neighborhoods. So it's surprising to people because I think it does have the biggest, image. You say Greenwich and immediately people think, a huge, house, that type of thing. It really has a lot of diversity. So yeah, it has both, quite honestly. I mean, it has the most expensive houses, the most amount of expensive big houses and the highest priced houses, but it also has diversity.
There are more multifamilies in Greenwich than there are in Darien or New Canaan.
Oh,
By
100%.
far. Yeah.
Probably a lot more choice under $1 million in Greenwich than Darien and New Canaan combined.
I would
Yeah,
agree with
by a
that.
lot.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
But the
But it's
quality
a
of
much bigger town.
It's a huge town. It's the biggest town by size in Fairfield County.
Mhm.
I have a client with a very good job in Greenwich, and he was renting, and he had $1 million, and he looked at $1 million houses in Cobb, and he has a good job as a superintendent of schools. Looked at $5,000 to $6,000 rentals, seems to be the Greenwich market, or buying a house in the 900s. He found every time he went after a rental for under $6,000 in Greenwich lately, he was competing with at least 12 other bidders. And when he was looking to buy in that same market, he was competing with 2 or 3 to buy a $900,000 or $1 million house in Cobb. And we looked at 4 or 5 and missed out in bidding wars on all 4 or 5. He ended up renting for $5,500 in Cobb, in the Cobb neighborhood. We finally got one. But yeah, they're out there because 2 or 3 popped up every week in the market, 2 or 3 $5,500 rentals. And eventually he got one. So it's a big enough market. And he wanted to be in the Cobb, neighborhood of Greenwich.
Let me just ask from a lifestyle standpoint, John, let's just say you want to go to dinner at Robyn's house and you got to drive to Rowayton. How long a drive is that?
Robyn's never invited me to dinner. I have no idea how long that would take, but I think that's a 15-minute drive.
What about to Greenwich or Old Greenwich? If you were like, you had a friend who said, come on over. How long is it going to take you to get there?
20 minutes if there's no traffic, but we only have two main roads, the Parkway and the Thruway. And if either one of those is tied up with rush hour, it could take you a lot longer.
And to you to get to John Dicenzo, he's inviting you too.
I try and get up to Westport or Fairfield all the time to see my son's lacrosse games. And if I'm lucky, it's 20 minutes. But if I'm not lucky, it could be 45.
Depends on the time.
You'll find me in Wilton, John.
Wilton, north-south is not subject to traffic. East-west is subject to rush hour traffic and both Post Road, Parkway, Thruway. But getting up to Wilton, my perception is I can get to Wilton in 10 minutes.
Right.
But Ridgefield can be 15 minutes, or it can be 45 because Ridgefield's huge.
Yeah.
Right.
Depends on where you are. I mean, from Rowayton, it's 45 minutes. I almost croaked when I took my kid on a play date. I was like, this is forever. But it was so pretty once I got there.
I heard Ridgefield borders Canada in some areas.
Scott, you're in New Canaan?
Yes. So it
So
takes
you
me
can get to
about
John's
3
house
minutes
really
to get to
easily.
John.
Is John invited you over to his house yet?
He has, but we haven't made it over quite yet. He said I had to bring my
I
chain.
told him to bring his chainsaw is what I told him. And he hasn't come.
He's got 2 great Cape Cod chairs that I saw in a video. I want to sit there with him, have a beer. Looks very nice there at your new house.
I think that's a great way to end the hour. Connecticut is full of beach chairs where you could come and have a beer, whether it's over at Robyn's house or Scott's house. Connecticut is great and open for business. And rumors aside, we've got plenty of room for all your friends, Roberto. All your friends, Michael.
I
And it's
appreciate
not in the boonies, Michael. Like literally, I can get you here within an hour. I promise.
I apologize.
I'm going to give you.
Michael, I can get to the furthest points of Ridgefield faster than you can get to Brooklyn or the South Street Seaport.
I can get to Brooklyn in 15 minutes by subway.
Okay, I can get to Ridgefield in 15 minutes. It's 12 miles and I drive fast on Route 123. I can get to Ridgefield in 15 minutes.
How much does the gas cost you?
I have an electric car. I don't know about you, but I have an electric car. It's great.
And Michael can get to East Hampton on Blade in about 40 minutes.
I'm a senior citizen. It cost me $1.35 on the subway.
All right, closing thoughts from everybody. We'll just go around the horn. Who wants to go first? What are your closing thoughts? Is Connecticut, is this going to continue, or favorite town, whatever you got? Robin, go ahead. You're first.
So the markets definitely continue to be hot. I would definitely encourage anyone who's curious, like Roberto, pick up the phone and call one of us. We're happy to, again, take you around. We're happy to, sit you on a beach chair and bring a great lunch from one of these amazing restaurants out here. So, just come out and visit. And again, take everything, come and see it for yourself.
John Dicenzo?
I learned a long time ago, predicting the markets is really a slippery slope. But I do think that the workplace dynamic and the advent and arrival of the millennials has changed the market. So I don't expect us to continue with this kind of intensity. I mean, I don't know, it'll last a bit, but I still think we can have a good market on the other side when this does subside and we're fully opened. It's just, we put up historic numbers in the last 6 months, and I just feel like we're Babe Ruth hitting 60 home runs every single month, and that can't last forever. But we can have a good, robust market, and perhaps the population swell, John, that you referred to earlier in this conversation, will drive us. But to Roberto's point, I think that will benefit all markets.
Thank you. Brian Cleary, what have you got?
Yeah, I agree with John. It's very hard to predict. It's so weird how fast everything changed from one year to the next in terms of flipping from a buyer's to a seller's market. But yeah, and Roberto, definitely come out and check out a few of the towns. I think you'll like it.
I'm just going to blow right by Stamford, though.
No, I think you would really like Stamford. Stamford is you, Roberto. It's hip. It's on the water. You got to go to the got to check out the waterfront in Stamford.
Okay.
Come by boat. We'll pick you up by boat. Best way
You've got to go to Japan, and I used to do so much business there. Japan and Stamford is such a unique and fabulous place. There's nothing like it. Nothing, as far as I'm concerned. And I know Rowayton like the back of my hand. I live in Weston. I know Westport, Fairfield. I know all the waterfront going up and down. I've sold on waterfront up in Rhode Island. I'm really into the waterfront, but that area is really superb. So don't discount it.
John Baton, any closing thoughts? You're muted.
Oh.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go. I always use the term a lot to my clients when we're debating over like a Darien over a Rowayton. And I always say, like, if you want to invest in your lifestyle, you move to Rowayton. If you want to invest in the dirt, you move to Darien. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, because if you come to Rowayton, you will feel like you're on Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard. You go down to Belle Island, it's just, you feel like you're nowhere near New York City.
Wow.
It's a really
you can see it. You can see it from Belle Island.
You can see it,
Yes.
but you don't, like, walking around, you just would never think that you're in the suburbs of Connecticut.
That's a pretty good pitch right there.
All right, Nancy Duck, unmute yourself. You are one of the most successful sellers of Connecticut real estate of all time. Definite Hall of Famer. Unmute yourself. Give me a prediction, Nancy Duck. Nope, you're still on mute.
She's working on it.
All right. I can't wait. I think the anticipation is worth it.
It is. There she is.
I think we're going to see a resurgence that's going to continue. I mean, I think that we're another year out in this market. I'm very optimistic. People are still coming out, whether they're renting or they've been renting and now they're going to buy because they like the school system, they like the lifestyle. I'm very optimistic. That's my take.
Are you going to run out of houses in Darien to sell them?
We're going to do our best to get them all sold. We just need the inventory.
I'm sure if anybody can beat the bushes and find a little bit more inventory in Darien, it's going to be Nancy Duck.
Oh, well, John, thank you. You're nice.
And Dawn, Wilton. I haven't heard anything from Wilton. Dawn and Wilton.
Well, everything goes so quickly, but I think the value is there. Wilton and Weston, the value is there. Great property. Come visit, Roberto.
Chief she's right, Roberto. If they threw me out of New Canaan tomorrow, I think I would look at Wilton first. I would, and not just because John Dicenzo and Dawn are listening carefully and they live there. I love Wilton as a value prop.
You froze.
That New Canaan lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have good, we have good,
Even
we
though
have good,
you were in Wilton.
we have good internet in
It
Wilton.
Freeze, John. In Connecticut, in New Canaan, they move a little slower.
Does anybody else want? Otherwise, I guess I'll ask Scott Hobbs. Do you want the last word, Scott?
Please.
You build everywhere.
Well, I'd say, I mean, under the economics of the area, just there's no question there's going to be a tail to this bull market. It just has to continue. And whether or not that tail is 6 months, a year, 5 years, I think that all depends on those other things that are out there, from taxes to governance to things well beyond all our control. But right now, there's buffalo on the plains and happy hunting to everyone.
All right,
I
there
would
you
like
go.
to add,
What was that from? Kevin Costner's movie, right?
That's it.
Diana?
yes. Hello, everyone. I would like to add that as a previous New York City denizen, my heart, a little piece of it will always be there. I lived in the Lower East Side. I lived in the financial district post the World Trade Center tragedy. I lived on Park Avenue on 70th. And I know the city very, very well. And I thought I would never, ever leave. And then I got married. And I still didn't want to leave. My husband is like, oh, come, we'll get an awesome place in New Canaan. And I was like, awesome. What is more awesome than the latest production of Akhenaten by the Metropolitan Opera? What is more awesome than this paella that I'm having, at, I forgot what it was called. It was a really delicious restaurant. But then I came here and I realized that I was able to hear this beautiful melody of birds that I was unaware that existed. And then the flowers that, I smelled, and the way the sun shines, and the size of my home, and the beauty of the roads, the warmth of the people. And those are the little things that won my heart. And I feel like those people that, you would feel like they were on their egress of New York City because of the competitiveness of the school system, because of the rat race that is eventually going to leave some people behind, that those are not the only people that are going to be egressing the city. And however, the people that do leave and come here because of the proximity of New York, that means that a lot of them have this little tie, this piece of their heart that's always with the city. And that's why this is such a strategic and special location. And, I really would invite people to come here with an open mind and clear nostrils and wide ears, so they could really get a sense of all the beauty that this place has to offer. Because oftentimes we're so accustomed and unwilling to change our views or to change the things that we are used to. That we might be missing the next great thing. And I just would like to add as well that I do believe that New Canaan and the surrounding towns are emerging, and also Stamford. I believe that they're emerging. It is inevitable that evolution happens, especially when new people come along, when people move in, but when they move out, even if the quantity of people remains the same, just the change that happens by swapping addresses is going to bring evolution. And I see it happening. It happened when I moved to New Canaan. I'm a Colombiana. I don't know many Colombian people out here, but I'm here saying hi to you. Also, I find that evolution. You do, Robyn?
There's 2 in Rowayton that I know, so I'm gonna have not to worry.
I should say hi.
Yeah.
So it's change for the better. But New York City always will be special. The big city lives, the Big Apple lives, but big bite to it. But come visit us.
Well, there you go, Roberto.
Fantastic.
There's your tour of Fairfield County.
Fantastic. It's a great hour. I really appreciate everybody giving me all this information.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, everybody, for participating. This is going to be our last show for a while, episode 28. Roberto and I are going to take the next couple months. We're going to take the summer off and recharge
Oh.
our batteries and sit in the lawn chairs and contemplate the fall season. So we'll see you back in the fall. Thank you, everybody. But this will live on YouTube and on the internet. So
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
thank you.
Enjoy the summer.
You too.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.